Okay, we're live. Let's go.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay, let's make a start then. So, welcome everyone to today's webinar. So, this is to discuss the managed service offering and the support offering from Mint in the context of unlocking return on investment from your ERP implementation. So, in terms of what I'm hoping to get out of today, I want to really distinguish the difference between what support is, so the BAU maintenance of what you have as the as is versus a managed service. So this notion of continuous improvement, what we offer in terms of a centre of excellence, and how that can be used to deliver one of our key offerings, which is Proactive Discover, which is our pre-discovery or pre-implementation discovery engagement. All of this ultimately links back to return on investment. So if the support offering and the managed service offering isn't optimal, then actually you're likely not to be getting the return on investment that you anticipated when you actually went live with finance and operations. Okay, just a little bit around Mint Group, Amar and myself. So Mint, we've been around for 25 years. We're a full stack partner and we've got presence across the globe. There's just some delivery centres there on screen. We are in a circle and have been for the past 10 years. We have 7 solution designations. We're in the top 1% of partners to hold those, and we are fast track ready. So that's really important in this context because working with Mint from a support or a managed service perspective means that we have roots into Microsoft that we otherwise wouldn't if we didn't have those credentials. I head up Mint here in the UK and I've been in the Dynamics space for 13 years.
And I'm Amar, Head of Solutions here in UK. Been implementing Dynamics for over 11 years now across partner side and customer side.
Okay, and just a few of our customers that we work with really across different disciplines. So on top of managed service and support, we obviously provide implementation as well, and we do a lot of optimization services. This slide is really designed to highlight the different types of customers that we work with. So it's a range. It can be greenfield, so no existing ERP, or it could be those customers that do have ERP but are looking to get more out of what they've already implemented. Just a couple of examples here. So if I take Lanes Group, so one of the company's leading wastewater management services, turns over 700 million, is on FTSE, and we've worked with them to optimize their D365 implementation, but also from a managed service and support perspective. Likewise with David Lloyd, and we had a presentation last week with one of our customers, Searchlight, for those that attended, and that was a really interesting customer, gone live with D365 at finance and operations, was set up fairly well, but actually there was a lot of the stack that this customer wasn't using, was paying a lot on licensing, had gone through a lot in terms of actually implementing that system. And we have worked with them in a centre of excellence capacity and a support capacity to make sure that they're getting the most out of the money they're spending on their ERP. So I'm sure that a lot of people already know some of the facts on this slide because I imagine a lot of you have been through ERP implementation, but just looking at the actual cost of ERP, it is significant for a company and it can range dependent on the size of the company, the complexity of the solution, and the disciplines within a company, but we're looking at kind of 2 million, sometimes up to 10 million to implement these things, pulling people out of the business, so there's an inevitable drop in productivity. These things are inherently risky. So when we're transitioning away from legacy disparate systems and implementing an ERP system, there is always an operational risk during that transition, and they take a long time. There's a lot of effort invested into these things, customer side and partner side. And the reason why it's really, really, really important to emphasize is because before we embark on any of this, there's always a lot of discussion around why are we doing this in the first place? What is the return on the investment? What are the success factors we're looking to see from this implementation? And it's all well and good and it's all mapped out and we go live and it largely fulfills what we originally thought would be the case. However, what tends to happen is we move into this BAU managed service support offering and things start to move away from those original principles that we set out before we actually implemented ERP. So shockingly, only 40% of customers actually realise the return on investment that they originally set out to realise, and it can be for numerous reasons. So one might be the fact that we've gone live, we don't actually have a thorough account of what the as-is solution is to a granular level, and what happens is there are requests through from the business and the system starts to be changed. Even more the case when you've got multiple vendors working on D365 and on finance and operations. What we tend to see is that we have pockets of people internally within a business that have a remit of configuring and changing D365. And we also have partners and vendors that also have that remit, but there's no centralized funnel with which to triage those changes. So the solution that was once standardized, and we spent a lot of money to actually standardize, ends up becoming something that's very disparate, and we move away from that template and we actually lose a lot of that standardization that we originally wanted to see. Naturally, if that's the case, you start to see people moving away from the process that underlies the ERP system. They start to return to their off-system processes, and they're not using the functionality within finance and operations. And just a couple of other things to call out as well. Ineffectual licensing structure. If there are changes to the process or changes to the solution or changes to the team using the solution, you can actually end up in a situation where your licensing structure is not optimal. Either you're paying too much for those licenses or you are underpaying. And there's a new change coming, I think, in the next couple of months, Amar, isn't it? Where we're going to start to highlight those people that have access to certain parts of the system that actually they shouldn't do based on their licensing structure. And I think we've got a webinar planned on that in the next few weeks. But it's certainly a real thing. I've mentioned here as well around the update service. As you know, finance and operations is evergreen. Microsoft release 4 updates per year, 2 of which are major releases, and there tends to be a lot of functionality wrapped up within that release. It's very important that as a business, you understand what those updates are and how that actually sits alongside the backlog of changes that you have and what's actually happening in support from a defect management perspective as well. Okay, so what do we mean by managed service and support? So you can see at the bottom there, this concept of business as usual. So nothing on this bottom line, I think, should stand out to anybody on this call or anybody viewing this, but we've got our traditional defect resolution, which is basically log a ticket into a ticketing system and it's dealt with by a team of support consultants or it's escalated to Microsoft. Just worth calling out that because we have our credentials with Microsoft in a circle, etc., we do have an escalated path to Microsoft. So it can be the difference of working with a partner who doesn't have those credentials. It can take months for Microsoft to respond, whereas if we log it, it can be a matter of days. We offer database refresh, performance monitoring, any hot fixes, out of hours management, etc., and naturally this update service and the associated regression testing. I've put that between this notion of BAU and continuous improvement because I think it should be treated as such. As I mentioned earlier, the update service contains a lot of functionality, and actually that functionality should be married back to the business in question and the processes that you have so that you're able to use that functionality optimally and you're able to assess it in the context of any changes you're making from a defect point of view and from a change request backlog point of view. Our true continuous improvement offering here at Mint is something called a Centre of Excellence, which is what I want to focus on today. So this is a separate offering to support. It is a separate team of people, but it's run and provided in very much the same way. So a subscription service and the ability to reach out to our delivery centres here at Mint. So just to recap on what we mean by a Centre of Excellence. So it is a subscription-based model, which means that we would work with you to come up with a number of days that you would have in the bank to work with us on things such as optimization and continuous improvement. Because it's a subscription and it's a sign up front, it is heavily discounted. So it's significantly cheaper than what we would offer as a standalone delivery rate and as a standalone piece of work. It guarantees quick and easy access to all of the delivery centres at Mint and to our UK finance and operations consultants, and that's really important. We've worked with customers in the past where there have been changes or optimizations that are required from a system perspective, and actually some of the partners that they work with are so bureaucratic that actually it takes weeks and weeks to actually arrive at having a person in place to deliver those changes. And what's more is because there are so many layers that change has to go through, there's a massive cost associated to it. Some customers view us as a centre of excellence as an extension of their internal team. So a lot of the customers that we work with have a really effective finance and operations team that can deal with kind of low severity tickets, defects, changes, and we're there to reach out to if there's anything that's particularly complex and anything particularly specialized. As I mentioned earlier, it is a subscription model, and what we can do is work with customers on a basis where you just have a bank of days that you can use as you wish, or actually we can advise on how you might use those days to get the most out of them. And one of the things that we always recommend is running our proactive discovery engagement, which some of you might be aware of. We've run a couple of webinars on this now, but that proactive discovery engagement is a way of really baselining the as is today and looking at where we want to be in the future and using the remainder of the Centre of Excellence days to actually put those optimizations in place. So just moving on to that concept of proactive discover and future state. Amar, I don't know if you want to say a little bit around some of the underlying IP that we have within proactive and how that might benefit some of our customers.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is one of the key sort of accelerators or bits of IP that we've developed as Mint to help really accelerate the time to value for the customers. As part of our Proactive Discover offering, you will get access to an industry-based accelerator for level 1 and level 2 processes across the sort of end-to-end flow of your business. So if we take manufacturing or services-based industries as an example, you will get access to the standard Microsoft level 1 and 2 processes. But what we've really done is taken those and tailored them and tweaked them to real life implementations, and based on years of experience of implementing ERP systems, and in particular Microsoft FNSCM, we've really tailored these process flows to start to create a really good starting point for discussions for the proactive discover engagement. And the key thing is using this to drive the discussions throughout the business to understand what is the as is situation today. Where are you with your solution? Where are you with your processes? But more importantly, moving that to a to be or a target operating model. So some of those challenges that Sammy mentioned earlier in the session around not understanding where you are today, actually not, goals, objectives, and strategy of the business might have changed over time. And actually what you haven't done is gone and redesign the underlying processes, or actually change the solution or kept up with the continuous improvement to make sure that you're still meeting those goals and objectives with the solution. So that's really the key thing here, is to understand where we are today and how can we optimize those processes and the solution to meet the changing needs and strategy of the business. So one of the key outputs of the proactive discover is a fully refined and tailored set of level 1 and level 2 processes for your business, where you see all of your key ERP processes, but also the touch points and the integrations to other systems and off-system processes as well. So that's a really, really great part of the proactive discover offering.
I think it's worth mentioning as well this base build tracker. So part of the IP that we've developed over the years here at Mint is something called a base build tracker, and that's essentially a very granular level of detail in terms of what features and parameters are currently set up in finance and operations. And that's crucial to have as a baseline, whether you're using it as a base for continuous improvement or defect management, because it allows you to, when a defect or a request comes through from the business, it allows you to judge whether it truly is a defect or if it's a change. And actually you can use that information to determine where that change or defect should move to next. That's important because, as I mentioned earlier, what we typically see is that there's no granular detail or definition. The business make lots of requests. They're not actually defects, the changes, they are implemented, and the system ends up going down a route where the solution that it was in hypercare post go live rapidly evolves without that definition having an audit trail, and you end up with something that actually you don't have a definition for, and it takes you down a route where you might not want to be operationally.
I think that's quite a key point in the summer. We've seen that with a lot of our customers now, where they've engaged with us, and one of the
Yeah,
key sort of standout things is they come to us and say, well, we don't actually understand where our solution is today.
yeah,
We don't understand what we've implemented. We know it's been installed, we know it's been implemented, but actually not what is in there. So part
yeah.
of that work, like you said, is really to to get a handle on what is there today so that you know how you're changing the system in the future and actually which
Yeah.
areas you should be focusing in on. So yeah, quite a key one there.
Yeah, absolutely that. And I think the thing to emphasize around proactive discover is that sometimes during continuous improvement, so when you get these changes come through, they're typically a backlog of ad
Mhm.
hoc changes. What we're endorsing with proactive discover is actually taking a step back and looking at the underlying business process so that we have a good idea of how those changes link together so that we advise on a route you should go down basically to get the most value. What we'd never want is for you to spend money on implementing ad hoc changes and actually you're not fundamentally attacking the challenge that you are seeing within the system. We identify that and we come up with a roadmap based on business value for you to implement those things and improve the use of your system. There's just a few steps on the screen here around proactive discover, just a couple of things to call out. So it's a pretty swift engagement. It can be anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks, dependent on the elements of the stack that we're looking at and the complexity of the business in question. There's a lot of output for a relatively short space of time and actually a relatively low cost. So as we mentioned earlier, we talk a lot around where the business wants to be in the future, this future state process. We come out with a 2B level 1 and 2 business process set of maps, play that back to the business to get the buy-in. We look at changes and optimizations to the system and the value associated with those, and we get everybody to agree to those as a business before we go anywhere near actually making those changes in the system. So it's a really nice way to redesign elements of the system and optimize elements of the system whilst also working with that change management aspect and making sure that everybody is bought into that future state before we go near reconfiguring or rebuilding elements of finance and operations. It's fundamentally built on design-led thinking. So some of you might be aware of something called Microsoft Catalyst that came out a couple of years ago. It's fundamentally built on the back of that, which is why Microsoft offer funding for this type of engagement as well. And that's something that we would judge on a customer by customer basis. Okay, so just to recap, what we would recommend is go for the Centre of Excellence if you're not getting the most out of your ERP system. It gives you quick and easy access to all delivery centres at Mint. You can use those discounted days however you choose. What we'd always recommend is using a proportion of those on Proactive Discover just to set that as is baseline and to set that future state process, business value, etc. And then we use the remaining days from the Centre of Excellence to actually put some of the key optimizations in place and drive some of that best practice. In terms of getting in touch, so really simple process. We would arrange a business assessment call, have a chat to you around what your challenges are today, how long you have had finance and operations in operation, and then we would investigate funding options with Microsoft, dependent on certain criteria, and then we'd send across a bespoke proposal for your consideration before setting up the subscription. But the access to that subscription and the individuals within the Mint team is immediate. So there's no lead time associated to that. It's something that we offer to lots of customers, and we have a team of people already waiting to move forward with that. Amar, I don't know if it's worth mentioning a little bit around the license optimizer element and just how critical that is in terms of the changes coming up in the next couple of months and how this process can help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this is one of the key changes that's affecting a lot of customers who've implemented Dynamics previously and are running it. So, I think customers have started to be made aware earlier this year there was going to be a change with the licensing in terms of license enforcement. So really it's been based on it's like more of like a trust-based system previously where you sign up to licenses and as long as you know you're within a certain tolerance and Microsoft think it's okay, you've got a decent amount of licensing, you kind of just allowed to access the system you know as needed, and that's changing now. I think there's a realization that that trust model wasn't quite working with a lot of the customers, so Microsoft are now sort of honing in on enforcing it to say, if you don't have the right level of licensing, you will no longer be able to access the system. So that's quite a key change for customers, because it's not to say customers were breaking that trust necessarily on purpose or trying to find loopholes, but if they were slightly undersubscribed or didn't have the right allocations, they could have still continued to use the system without too much error. That's going to change from November. So Microsoft's going to start cracking down. And if you kind of don't have the right level of licensing or allocated to the users when they try to access the system, from November onwards, they will now be blocked. So it will come with a warning to say you do not have the right license allocation, therefore please speak to your administrator and sort out the right level of licensing. So that is quite a change. And as part of this process, what we do is we work with customers to understand what is their licensing position. So once we've understood exactly what their as is system and solution today, what processes they have in place, but more importantly, where they want to be and their target operating model, we can take that information and assess their current licensing situation against that to firstly understand, how many licenses have they got? Are they correctly allocated? But secondly, can we actually optimize that
Mm.
to ensure, can we reduce the costs? Because very often when customers have gone live with the system, they've just bought a whole bunch of licensing and they've got these licenses and sitting there, but they're not correctly allocated, or maybe in some areas they're oversubscribed, some areas they're undersubscribed. So we really sort of tailor that and refine it to make sure you're using and paying for exactly what you need, and just making that as efficient as possible. So throughout this process, we kind of come back to that and assess it to make sure we've got the right level of licensing. And actually, we've got a further bit of sort of technology and IP who we partner with one of our partners around, is some telemetry based insights. So we can actually have the telemetry sitting on the customer's tenant, and it collects information over time as to what the users are truly using on a day-to-day basis. So there's theory to say the user should be using this based on the process, but actually the telemetry takes it one step further to say, what are they using on a daily basis? They should have been utilizing these, but actually they haven't accessed these features for 6 months. And these features that they haven't accessed for 6 months or a year are actually attracting a higher license cost than you otherwise could be getting away with paying. So that's a further step then to the license optimization to really take it, to a very refined level. But all of that kind of offering sits off the back of this proactive discover process that we spoke about, to understand where is a customer today in the as is and where can they be, and optimizing and enhancing the system across the board, both functionally and technically.
Yeah, brilliant. I've
Okay.
just seen a question pop through there.
Yeah.
Can you access that, Emma?
Yeah, we currently have a bug in the report. Custom role has been created, and when viewed in security configuration, it appears to use the team member license. However, license use summary, the same role is shown as requiring a finance and supply chain license. Okay, so it seems like there's a custom role there that's been created. And the question is around a custom role.
Mm.
And essentially, various reports are showing varying information on what license that should attract. In one screen, it appears that it should be a team member license. However, in another report,
Okay.
it's suggesting it's a full finance or supply chain license. I
Yeah.
believe that is the question. Just correct me if I've misunderstood that. Yeah, okay. I think that's, if you reach out to us or follow up with an email after this session. I think we can get one of our technical team to investigate that. I think it would just be a slight code review to understand what the custom role is and get a true understanding of which license it should
Yeah.
attract. I think until we get into that level of detail, we can then find the right report which should be considered.
Yeah, and just I think worth mentioning as well, just on that, we see a lot of customers that have custom roles, heavily customized. That isn't always necessary. So part of this proactive process of redesigning this to be business process leads quite nicely into what the actual security roles, segregation of duties, etc., should be. And a lot of the time, we're able to take customers back towards standard rather than sitting with these custom roles that have to be maintained.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Anvesh, if you reach out to us after the session, just follow us up with a just get that information across. We can jump on a call and get one of our technical team to investigate that with yourself.
Okay. Any more questions? Brilliant. Well,
Doesn't look like we have any more. No.
no. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Please do reach out if you've got any more questions on what we've presented today, or anything else. And speak soon. Thank you.
Cheers all. Take care.